Every map you have ever seen is wrong. Not just slightly inaccurate, but fundamentally temporary. Because the ground beneath our feet is not solid. It's a collection of colossal rafts, adrift on a sea of molten rock, constantly in motion. But what if they weren't? What if the single greatest divorce in planetary history never happened? What if the continents never broke apart, and all of Earth's land remained a single, gargantuan landmass? The world you would be living in wouldn't just be different, it would be a nightmare. And chances are, you wouldn't be living in it at all. To understand the world that wasn't, we first have to visit the world that was. Around 300 million years ago, all of Earth's continents were smashed together, forming a supercontinent scientists call Pangea. Pangaea means all lands in ancient Greek. And they weren't kidding. From the South Pole to the North Pole, it was one unbroken stretch of rock and dirt. You could have walked from modern-day Antarctica to Siberia. There were no Atlantic or Indian Oceans. There was just land, and the one planet-spanning ocean that surrounded it, Pangaea. But Pangaea wasn't built to last. The immense heat building up from the planet's core underneath this continental blanket forced it to crack. It ripped apart, creating the continents and oceans we know today. This breakup wasn't just a geological event. It was the trigger for life, as we know it. And if it had failed, the consequences would have been catastrophic. First, let's talk about the weather. If Pangaea never broke apart, the vast majority of the land would be one of the most hostile environments imaginable, an eternal, globe-spanning desert. On our Earth, oceans and seas bring moisture deep into continental interiors. The Atlantic feeds rain to Europe and the Americas, the Indian Ocean to Asia. But on a supercontinent, the coast is thousands of kilometers away. The interior of Pangaea would be an arid, scorched wasteland stretching for millions of square kilometers. We're talking about a desert that would make the Sahara look like a garden. Temperatures in the summer could reach a blistering 60 degrees Celsius, or 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It would almost never rain. The only habitable zones would be a thin fringe of land along the coast, which would be battered by constant, ferocious mega-monsoons, as the enormous landmass superheats and cools every year. You'd have a choice: live in a permanent desert hellscape, or on a coastline ravaged by storms more powerful than anything in the modern world. In our world, the breakup of the continents created isolated evolutionary laboratories. Life on Australia, South America, and Africa was left alone for millions of years, free to develop in weird and wonderful ways. This is why we have kangaroos, anacondas, and giraffes. This separation created immense biodiversity. On a permanent Pangaea, that would never have happened. There would be no isolation. It would be a worldwide free-for-all. Any new species that evolved would have to compete with every other species across the entire landmass. This wouldn't create a rich tapestry of life. It would create a planet of hyper-efficient, generalist super-competitors. Evolution would likely favor a smaller number of incredibly tough, adaptable species that could survive anywhere, from the storm-beaten coasts to the desert's edge. Forget biodiversity. Pangaea would be the planet of the mundane, dominated by a few species of hardy, hyper-aggressive animals and tough, scrubby plants. It would be a world of evolutionary stagnation. And what about that single, giant ocean, Pangaea? It would have been a world of its own mysteries, with no continents to block them. Ocean currents would flow in massive, planet-circling gyres. Storms, with an uninterrupted runway of thousands of kilometers of water, could grow to sizes we can barely comprehend, creating waves that would make a modern tsunami look like a ripple in a pond. But here's the most profound consequence of a world without separation. It's not just that the animals would be different. It's that complex life, especially intelligent life, might never have gotten its chance. The breakup of Pangaea was a planetary reset button. It created thousands of miles of new, shallow seas, the perfect nurseries for marine life to diversify. It stabilized the global climate, ending the violent swings between furnace and freezer. The creation of the Atlantic Ocean, for example, established the global conveyor belt of ocean currents that gives Western Europe its mild climate. These stable, varied, and isolated environments were the crucibles of evolution. The changing landscapes, driven by continental drift, constantly challenged life to adapt, to get smarter, to specialize. It was the geological chaos of the breakup that directly led to the rise of the dinosaurs, and after them, the rise of the mammals. And eventually, after millions of years of continental nudges and shoves creating new mountains, new rivers, and new savannas in Africa, it led to us. On a static, unchanging Pangaea, stuck in its cycle of desert and deluge, the evolutionary pressure might never have existed. It could have remained a planet of tough reptiles and hardy insects. Forever, a failed experiment. So the next time you look at a map of the world, remember that you're not just seeing land and water. You're seeing the result of the most important breakup in history. The mountains, the oceans, the very climate you live in, all of it, is a lucky consequence of a planet that refused to stay still. We exist not in spite of our world's geological instability, but because of it.